Hiya. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me. We were actually together at the Redpanda Connect event on the New York Stock Exchange floor just last week. So great to be back and chatting with you guys again. Super excited today to talk a bit about Poolside, a bit about what we're doing and why we're so excited about this partnership with Redpanda. And so we'll start at the very beginning. First of all, Poolside. So Poolside, we're a frontier model research and deployment company. And this means we focus on two things. So number one, getting to the next generation of frontier models. And for this, we actually just announced a 2 gigawatt compute data center that we're building out in Texas that we're very excited for. And the second thing we do is on the deployment side. So we focus on taking that raw intelligence and deploying it into useful systems that do actual real work. And this has a whole host of problems that we are building around and building platforms for, with the goal being useful AGI for enterprise. And so if we think about the current state that we're in, and especially everyone on this call right now, I'm sure will agree, right now, a lot of the most forward-thinking enterprises are really thinking, how do they reorganize around AI? We really exist to try and accelerate and drive this transformation. And so if we actually put this into practice, what does that actually mean? So when we start working with an enterprise, there will usually be a few key areas that they're really interested in. And those key areas are almost always have a bunch of different data sources and a bunch of different teams working on them. And so much as any human needs to be able to interact with the tools to allow them to use the job to get access to the data that allows us to do the job. As we start thinking about reorganizing it around AI, and in particular trying to get towards a more agentic, agent-based workforce, they have exactly the same problems. And so when we think about, if we take, for example, a financial firm may be trying to tackle use cases around customer onboarding, customer interaction. In order for any agent to be able to do things around this, they need to be able to access, customer data in different ways, and this is going to be spread out. And so Redpanda Connect is the first layer. They basically provide this, agentic data plane, and on top of this, we can start building our platform. So we think about this Redpanda Connect, this agentic data plane. Now, all of a sudden, we've got a system that can start interacting with these different data sources. So that financial firm, for instance, can connect to their AWS to get that customer information, or their Snowflake to look at their data processing pipelines. And this is all fuel to feed into the intelligence layer. And so this is where we start applying permissioning and security on top, and ultimately feeding into our agent platform. And so this platform is really focused on essentially trying to solve an organization's really hardest and most valuable problem areas. And there's a lot that goes into doing that, which I'm going to walk towards in a second. But only by having this kind of cohesive data layer, and on top of that, feeding into a nice, secure and permissioned environment, and then finally leading to a platform that you can actually start configuring and deploying these agents in a secure way. It's only by doing this you can start really trying to approach something that's useful for your employees. And this fusion together eventually drives towards this future workforce, this kind of elastic agent workforce that we really believe strongly in. So maybe to put it a little bit more real, I'll actually go over that example. So if we think about that finance firm, they have a customer onboarding flow. This customer onboarding flow, they have to do a bunch of checks. It's an AML thing, anti-money laundering, and doing all of those checks takes a lot of time, and it's usually something that requires a lot of resources. So in this case, we can start out with that base layer, first of all, connecting to all of our different data sources that we might need to connect. And this is through the Redpanda Connect. So in this case, we've got all of our different data sources. Here, we've already connected. And these are real connections, by the way. So in this case, to S3 and Postgres and Reddit, these different kind of things that we need the agent to be able to interact with. Once we've got that as a layer, we can then start defining the agents themselves. So in this case, if we're looking at a given agent, for instance, customer onboarding, the first thing that the first thing that we want to do is define the tools that they have access to. So we need a view to be able to define those tools. So in this case, saying, yeah, you can interact with our Postgres and you can interact with all of these different things. Now, there are other parts around here around kind of artifacts and subagents, but I'm not going to get into that for now. What I'm going to now talk about is the next step. Okay, you've got an agent and it's got access to all of its tools, but you now need it to follow often a fairly stringent process, a very specific workflow, and you don't want the agent to deviate. Or if it does deviate, then you want to be basically alerted around that. So in this case, we start defining what we call a workflow. In this case, a sequence of steps where each step has a verification gate. So in this case, if we break down the task of doing an AML customer onboarding check, it's basically interacting with a bunch of different data sources and making a complete profile of that person and then making sure everything lines up. And so in this case, we can break that down into specific steps. Each one has what we call a verification gate, where we spin up an entirely separate agent to test that actually has done what it said it's going to do. There's more here around how you then can deal with compaction and context management, which is a massive thing. But all of this comes together to mean that we now have agents and they can interact with data sources. Now, they need somewhere to work. And so for this, we manage the agent compute fleet. And this is essentially, much like humans, agents need persisted places where they can actually do their work. And so in this case, we spin up essentially these virtual work environments that allow the agents to do that work. So now we've got these agents, we've got the defined workflows, we've got the environments for them to work in, and we've got the tooling to allow them to actually interact with that data in a permissioned way. So we can now start running them. So for instance, we've got our customer, we've got our different agents that we want to do, and we can look at a given example run. So for instance, in this case, we said, hey, you've got this new customer application. Can you determine if they have any hidden connections? We can get the high-level overview, essentially deny onboarding. So the agent here has gone over, done some investigation and said, hey, you should really deny this onboarding. Usually this would have taken a person, 3-4 hours. In this case now, they can instead review that work. So going through, they can see that why they've actually recommended deny onboarding, but often you want to go one level deeper. So in this case, actually look at all of the different things that the agent has done. So in this case, you can see all of these different steps that it's actually done. So it's found some address proximity that's linked to another known person, which is actually under investigation with an AML for AML, and then they found some supporting information as well around similar receipts. So all of these things are nice because whereas previously it would have had to be a person basically going to all of these different source systems, quite monotonous, tedious work. In this case now you can instead review that and the agent can interact with these things much faster, which is definitely a useful thing to do. There's more around how you can essentially make sure that you're getting the most out of your agent, so extracting out, are there any errors running with it? Are there any tools that maybe need to be added? But I'm for now going to leave that and instead briefly just show where we think this is going. So this is a preview of the next gen that we think this product is going to be. And in particular, this is how do you actually then start combining these things to make real agentic flows. So in this case, we've got our agents, we've configured our workflow. Now at this point, we can start defining a pipeline. So often a given process will be a mixture of deterministic steps that might need to do a bunch of different things and then very specific agents. So in this case, for instance, if this is doing some document analysis or trying to, in this case, the actual pipeline is trying to go from a C repo to a Rust repo. Here we can define a bunch of steps in code and each one of these can then fan out to essentially start from a single bit of work, but then expand out to break that task down and apply multiple agents in parallel. So by doing this, we can start with an example thing that we want to automate. We can break it down in terms of what agents we have, what workflows we want them to follow, and then orchestrate this whole thing to have this nice kind of auditable system that we can start looking at and working over time. So this is really where we see the future of the workforce going, heavily agentic, essentially individuals working with and commanding stacks of agents and working with kind of these dynamic systems that can really do just a lot more and a lot of interesting things. Going to stop there, but it was a pleasure chatting to you guys. Thanks for having me on.